up me hearty roads, there's dice to be rolled, and yarns to be a-telling. We want the gold.
Welcome to the Haunted Graveyard. This is going to be our setting for this demonstration game, and if you want to see how all this board was put together, there is a series covering all that up on the channel. So we've got a church right in the centre, we've got 3 mausoleums containing who knows what, and we've got plenty of tombstones and gravestones and all the rest of it scattered around. The basic conditions for the graveyard are that visibility is limited because there's a heavy fog, a heavy mist, so visibility is limited to about 25 centimetres, which means that anyone going faster than walking speed off of any of those paths is going to have to make a roll to stay on their feet to make sure they don't trip over or anything. So the movement is going to be fairly slow and the visibility is a bit limited. It's a classic spooky setting, basically. Now, as this is a demo game and I want to keep things moving quickly, we're just going to use 2 factions, each made up of 4 individuals. So let's start by having a look at our characters. We start with the blue team, our halflings. We have Tommy, Basil, Polly and Ada, who together form the Sneaky Finders, halfling thieves. They're all thieves except for Basil, who is a druid. Now, as they are halflings, the GM has decided to give them all the automatic trait of stealth. And their objective here, well, they've heard about old Tam the Miser, who was recently buried in the cemetery, and the rumours are that old Tam's gold was buried with him. So a simple objective: get into the graveyard, have a search around, find the old miser's gold, and liberate it, I suppose we could call it. And in the opposing corner we have the purple team, the Necromancer crew, led by Nocturnus, along with Igor, Gorm and Burke. Their objective is, well, one, sort of rooting around in old graveyards is standard for necromancers, so any fresh bodies are always welcome. But they've also heard a rumour that a dread tome, the Nookinomicon, has been concealed somewhere in this graveyard. And of course we have a supporting cast of various beasties and creatures that may or may not be making an appearance as we go through the scenario. So those are our figures. Of course, we need a few other things, of course. We've got our character sheets, we've got our standard dice and tape measures, and the characters are put into position. The halflings are going to start at the main gate there, and the necromancer team are starting in the opposite corner, coming through those woods. So as I mentioned, the purpose here really is to give you an overview of how the game mechanics run. And because I'm running the game myself, one thing you're not going to get, which is a huge part of the game, is the interaction between all the players, of course, notes being handed backwards and forwards and all that sort of thing. So do bear that in mind. This is pretty much just a mechanical run through. I'll try and add in a little bit of narrative where I can. We've mentioned the conditions in the graveyard. We've got that reduced visibility and the danger of tripping over if you go at faster than walk speed pretty much anywhere. We've got our 3 mausoleums. Now the doors of those may be locked or they just may be very heavy. Might need a feat roll to open those. And of course we've got the possibility that when you go rummage around in graves and similar, you might disturb anything that has decided to make that spot its home. So there's the potential for that, and also there could well be guardians or things haunting the graveyard as well. And we're going to start by running the game in real time, so to speak, so each activation in turn, at least for the first turn or so you can see how all that works. And then as we get into it, we'll speed things up a little bit just so we can progress the game along. And all that's left to do now is put the counters in the bag, 1 counter for each character, and we can begin turn 1. The first counter out of the bag is blue, so that's the halflings. They get to activate 1 character. The gate in front of them is locked, so they decide to activate Polly, who has the trait of lock picking. So she's going to use 1 action point to try and pick the lock and a second to push the gate open. This is where you have to balance the game, because if this was a standard RPG, as a GM, you might want to make a bit of a meal of this. It doesn't really matter in RPG terms that they'll spend 20 minutes trying to open the gate. There could be all sorts of magic locks on it and that kind of stuff. However, where you've got a tabletop game with other players involved, having one team spending 4 turns just trying to get onto the board is not really enjoyable gameplay. So you'll find a lot of things in the game like this, locks and traps and the monsters, are really just there as inconveniences rather than major plot points, if you like. Your major narrative is always going to come from the other players. Alright, so lockpicking is based on agility. Polly has an agility of 15. When we look on the feat table, we see that that puts this in the easy category. However, because she has that lockpicking trait as well, that brings it down 1 in terms of difficulty. So it goes from easy to automatic success. But we still need to roll a dice, because a 1 is always a fumble, a 20 is always a critical. So we roll the dice and get 18. No problems there at all. Polly picks the lock and spends her second action points pushing the heavy rusty gates open. And you'll notice we place that counter next to the figure just to show that it's been activated for this turn. Our second counter from the bag is also blue, so the halflings get to activate again. This time it's going to be Tommy the leader, and he's going to use 2 action points to actually go into the cemetery. He's walking along the path, he's being a bit cautious, he's going to head towards that church at the middle. So 2 action points of walking, each gives a distance of 12, so Tommy moves 24 centimetres up the path towards the church. And the next counter out of the bag is purple, so let's switch over to the Necromancer faction. And they're going to activate Burke first of all. He's going to spend 1 action point walking across to that graveyard. Now bear in mind he's walking because he's coming off the path. He doesn't want to risk anything at this stage. And once he gets to that grave, he's going to spend his second action point on having a little rummage around. However, before we get to the search, the GM looks on his map key and sees that this grave is home to a nest of rats. And he decides that they will activate on a 1 or a 2 on a d6. So we roll the d6 and we get a 5. So the rats don't activate, they scurry off. Burke is now free to search. Had they activated, then we would have had a rat attack. So searching works off of the wit attribute. Burke has a wit of 14. And this is going to be just a surface search because he's just using 1 action point. He's basically sweeping away the dead leaves, seeing if he can spot anything unusual. So we go to the feat table, and an attribute of 14 makes this an easy search. The GM determines there are no other modifiers. Now, normally the GM would make this roll in secret because it's a bit like a spot hidden. You know, if you fail to spot it, it doesn't mean that it isn't there. So the GM makes the roll, and it's a 17. If there was anything there, Burke would have spotted it, but there isn't, so the player is informed you find nothing. Our next counter is purple, so now the Necromancer is going to activate Gorm. Perhaps worried by the scurrying of those rats, Nocturnus decides to send his bodyguard in, just as backup. Gorm is a kind of undead servitor, so he's not really that good for searching and that kind of stuff. He's the muscle, basically. So he's never going to be far from Nocturnus. He also moves quite slow as well because he's wearing heavy armour. And it's just going to use 1 action point this turn, just to move up in support. And it's a purple counter again, so we're going to activate Nocturnus this time. From what you can see, there's a nice big monolith just straight ahead of him. He can just about pick that out of the fog. So he's going to spend 2 action points walking towards that. Each walk is 12 centimetres, so 2 of those gives him a movement of 24, which just about brings him up to the monolith and is ready to have a search around that next turn. And the next counter is blue, so back to the halflings. Another blue counter is drawn, so this time the halflings will activate Basil the Druid, who is going to use his 2 action points to walk and walk, so 24 centimetres, bringing him up in support of Tommy. And it's another blue, so it's the last halfling character, Ada the Assassin. And she's going to move in to the graveyard for 1 action point. And then she's looking around. She can see that big mausoleum to her right. So Ada decides to go and investigate that. So that's a 12 centimetre walk in. And then the second 12 centimetres across towards the mausoleum. And that leaves one character unactivated, our friend Igor. So he's going to use his first action point to move to that grave just in front of him. Even though he's just making a short move, that still counts as 1 point. And his second AP he's going to use to search. Now the GM has checked the map key and there's no beasties lurking here, so we're just straight into the feat roll. Igor has a wit of 10. Again, the GM will make this roll in secret, and he informs the player that he finds nothing. So that's the end of turn 1. What we do now is gather up all the counters, put them back in the bag, and we get ready for turn 2. So now we've seen how the activation works, we're going to skip ahead a little bit. We've had Basil and Tommy already activated. They've searched that grave there and found nothing. Meanwhile, Polly has gone across to the left. She's going to start searching the gravestones over there. And we're just about to activate Ada, the assassin, who, as you may remember, was going to check out that mausoleum. So her first action point is going to be moving up to the door, and her second action point is going to be spent on seeing if she can open it. So at 12 centimetres, she's easily within range, brings her up to the door, and she puts her shoulder to it. Attempting to open this sort of door is a function of strength, and Ada has a strength of 13. The GM says there's nothing else unusual or odd about it. It isn't locked, it's just very large and old and stiff. We look on the feat table and we discover that 13 means that's a medium feat. So we roll the dice and we score an 11. Consulting the table again, we see that that is a success. So Ada has managed to push that door open. There's a squeak of rusty hinges, and something else now happens because there is a denizen in that mausoleum. The first thing Ada notices is the awful stench that comes rolling out towards her. Yes, we have a ghoul inside. So the ghoul looms out of the doorway, and when we look at the ghoul statistics, we see that they have the trait of stench. And what this means is that anyone coming within 5 centimetres of that on their first encounter has to make a saving roll in order not to freeze and gag on their next turn. This means that Ada now has to make a save roll versus fear. Checking on the fear table, the ghoul has a fear factor of 11 and Ada has a will of 14, so she needs to roll 9 or higher on a d20 to save. And she rolls an 11, so she's perfectly fine. Naturally again, a 1 there would be disastrous, and a 20 would give her some form of extreme success. In each of these cases, this can be worked out by the GM and the players. However, we do now have a melee situation because that ghoul has used 1 action point to close and the second to attack. So let's look at melee. The ghoul has an attack factor of 1 and Ada has a defense factor of 13. 13 minus 1 gives us a base of 12 or higher for the ghoul to hit. However, Ada has already activated. That gives the ghoul an extra bonus of 1. So 13 minus 1 minus 1 means the ghoul needs 11 to hit. Basically, if a character is already activated, then they're not able to defend themselves quite as well. So it's a d20 roll and it's 11 or above to hit, and the ghoul rolls an 8. It misses. Lucky Ada. Now, normally, of course, we'd be rolling these dice on the tray and not on the table. But we're doing this just so you can see the die rolls. The ghoul is now active on the table, so he gets given a black counter. That will be added to the bag at the end of the turn. Any creatures or monsters on the board get activated in the same way as characters. Okay, so we head back to the Necromancers now, and again, some of these have already activated. They're moving deeper into the graveyard, searching as they go. Nothing in particular has been found yet. Gorm is sticking close to Nocturnus, and Nocturnus now is just going to activate, and he's going to have a search around that tall monolith. A big important monument like that, surely there's something worth digging around for at its base. Nocturnus activates and decides he's going to spend 1 action point on searching and then 1 moving off towards the church. You do have the option, of course, to spend 2 action points on searches, in which case you'll get 2 rolls. However, Nocturnus has a wit of 17, very high, so that's going to be an easy feat. It's very likely that he's going to be successful. The GM rolls again in secret and informs the player that he finds nothing. And Nocturnus thinks it's pretty likely there's nothing there, so with his second action point is moving off towards the church. That brings us to the end of turn 2. All the counters go back in the bag now, including our friendly ghoul. Turn 3. Fortunately for the halflings, it's a blue counter first, so they're going to activate Ada, and she decides, as an assassin, not really a fighter, rather than go toe-to-toe with this ghoul, she's going to try and disengage from it. So any character in melee can try and disengage. It costs 1 action point, and they have to make a feat roll based on agility. Now Ada's got a high agility of 15, that makes this an easy feat. However, the GM adjudicates that this is quite a nimble and very hungry ghoul, so it's going to bump the difficulty level up to medium. Ada rolls the dice, and it's a 20, an outstanding success. And when we consult the disengage table, we see that an outstanding success means that the person is successfully disengaged. They can move 1 action point's worth of movement away, and they get a free snap attack as they go. So that really couldn't have gone any better for Ada. Now, because of that attack, the ghoul does get the option to activate. It can't counter-attack because Ada is successfully disengaged. However, if it does activate, it does get a bonus on its defense. The ghoul decides not to activate. It's going to save its movement for later on to see if maybe it can catch up to Ada, or maybe another of those tasty little halflings over by the grave there. And of course it's the Game Master making any decisions for the monsters or creatures, or the Game Master could make it a random dice roll, or if you're playing without a GM, one of the players can make that roll. The ghoul's defense factor is 11, Ada's attack factor is 2, so 11 minus 2 is 9. There's also minus 1 because the ghoul is not activated. That takes us down to 8. However, there is plus 2 because this is a snap attack. That takes us up to 10. However, a 15 is rolled, and Ada is dual wielding daggers. Pair of daggers, that's going to be 2d6 damage. The damage rolled is 6. The ghoul has 10 health points, so 6 is quite a chunk. Given that, it might even retire back into the mausoleum to lick its wounds. However, Ada now gets to move because she disengaged. So she's going to continue walking, doesn't want to risk running through the cemetery with the ghoul behind her. She gets to move her normal 12 centimetre walk distance. The next counter is blue as well, so things are working out well for the halflings. Now, Basil, he still sees that ghoul lurking there. He doesn't know how badly damaged it is, so he decides he's going to whack it with a spell. He has a spell factor of 2. He's got 2 spells on him. One is Earth to Mud, and the second one is a nice druidy thunderbolt. Guess what one he's going to throw at that ghoul. Now, the characters would normally have their spells written on the faction sheet or the stats for the spells, but if we look in the book under Appendix C spells, it's a harm spell, obviously. It's under Smite. It has a range of 25 centimetres. It will affect a single figure or any figure in melee with it. Takes 2 action points to cast, and the damage is going to be 1d8 per spell factor of the caster. The GM can give a dodge at their discretion, though the GM here decides not to because Basil is a fair distance away and the ghoul is probably more concerned with Ada, the fleeing Ada, rather than a funny little bloke waving his arms in the distance. In normal circumstances, the magic user rolls a d20 to cast the spell, and anything but a 1 means the spell works. A 20, of course, is a critical success. Now, the GM can modify that if the magic user is under any particular type of pressure. For example, the GM may assign a number that the magic user has to roll over, in which case they get to add their spell factor to the roll. However, Basil makes a successful roll. He doesn't roll a 1. And then follows that up with 2d8 for 9 points of damage. I think that ghoul is quite comprehensively blown apart. Blown apart? Bonaparte. Meanwhile, back with the necromancers. Igor has moved to the church. Next turn he's planning on going in to have an explore around the old church. Gorm is staying close to Nocturnus, who has moved up to another grave, and he's got one action point left after his movement, so he decides he's going to use that to search this grave. Now this is one noted on the map as having denizens, so the GM's going to roll the dice to see if they're activated. And it's a 1. So yes, we're going to have some rats popping out now. These are your standard graveyard rats, and although there's a few figures on the base, it's just basically one attack. It's a swarm attack. They have an attack factor of 0. Nocturnus has a defense factor of 10, so it's just a straight 10 on the dice roll. Now, you could argue for a surprise attack here, but the GM adjudicates that Nocturnus is an experienced necromancer. He's been poking around graveyards for a long time. He's not going to be surprised by a few mangy rats. So it's a straight 10 on the dice roll, and it's a 17. The rats get a few bites and scratches in. They just do 1d3 damage, so it's a d6 halved. And it's a 2. So Nocturnus just takes 1 point of damage. I think he's got 18 health points, so he's down to 17. Not a big concern, but not an entirely pleasant experience, I would imagine. That was the last activation of turn 3, so we move into turn 4. First counter out of the bag is purple, and the Necromancer team decide to activate Gorm first, who's going to step up and do his job of protecting his master. So it's 1 action point to move, 1 to attack. The rats choose to activate on the off chance that they might get a counter attack here. He has an attack factor of 2, and the rats have a defense factor of 8. So it's just a basic 6 or more required, and he rolls an 18. Now he's using a two-handed sword, quite overkill against rats, I would imagine, but that gives him 2d6 damage, and he gets a +1 bonus because of his high strength. So 2d6 plus 1, that gives us 6, 7. That's more than enough to squish and scatter the rats. They're taken off the board. They don't even get their chance to counter-attack, because of course Gorm initiated that attack. Incidentally, I don't think I've mentioned it yet, but there is an option for whoever inflicts the most damage in melee to push their opponent back a couple of centimetres. They then have the option to follow up straight away at no extra cost in action points, or of course they can use that space next turn, perhaps to escape or disengage. It's not really arisen so far in this scenario, it seems, but that pushback option is there. And the next counter is purple, so Nocturnus is going to activate. Now, he lost his search last turn because you can't search an area that's got active animals or denizens in it, especially if they're attacking you. But anyway, he's going to spend 2 action points now searching this grave. Nocturnus has a wit of 15, so that's an easy feat, no other modifiers. And although he's using 2 action points to dig, he just gets 1 roll, because the 2 action points are for him to dig deeper down rather than just the surface. So the roll is a 17, a success, and he uncovers the lid of a large, interesting looking chest. Presumably this is old Tam's treasure. Not exactly what Nocturnus was looking for, but you know, gold is gold even for a necromancer. So both these characters have used their action points for the turn. They're going to either have to get one of their colleagues across or wait until next turn to properly dig that chest out and carry it off. Did you know that halflings can smell gold? Or maybe these ones can. Polly's attention is drawn by the movement of Nocturnus and Gorm. Visibility is a bit restricted, of course, but she decides to move up for a closer look behind that large tombstone, and she's within about 20 centimetres there. So she does get to see this pair hunched over a grave and pulling out what appears to be a large treasure chest. Her interest is immediately piqued, and she whispers to the others to move up. Tommy activates next, and he's just going to use 1 action point to move up to the corner of the church and have a little peek around as well. The thieves are gathering. It's a purple counter out of the bag next, so we're back to the necromancers. Igor is going to use 1 action point to open the door, or attempt to open it, and another one to go inside and have a look round. The GM informs him that the door is not locked, it opens very easily. So Igor gets to move inside the church for a search. It's going to have a search in the church. Igor's wit is 10, so that's a medium difficulty with no modifiers. And we get the dice roll, 7. So looking on the table, that gives us a partial success. The GM now describes the interior of the church and what Igor can see, and he may do this in the form of a note to the player or just take the player to one side. Now, it was a partial success, so Igor can't see much, but he does notice an altar at the far end, and there appears to be an object on the altar. So that's something he can go and inspect more closely on his next turn. Let's move into the next turn then, and we have Burka's moved off to explore more graves. We have Gorm has dug out and lifted out that chest. Nocturnus has kicked the lid open to reveal, yes, it is full of gold. As I said, not the grimoire he was looking for, but no one's going to complain about finding gold. The greedy halflings, meanwhile, look on with rapt attention. All they can see is the glimmer of gold in the torchlight. Now, by the way, because they are all stealthy, they've all got the trait of stealthy, the GM has adjudicated that Nocturnus can't really see the halflings at the moment. They're all lurking in the shadows over to the side there, but that could be about to change. And in fact, Tommy decides to make a move now. He's going to use one action point on his activation to creep along the edge of the church there to stay in the shadows. So he's going to have to make a stealth roll to do that successfully. That's an agility-based skill. Tommy has an agility of 15. If we look on our feat table, we see that's easy. Tommy also has the trait of stealth, which gives a bonus for any sort of creeping up type activity. That makes this an automatic success, unless, of course, Tommy rolls a 1, which will be a failure, or a 20, which will be an outstanding success. And a 5 is rolled, so that's fine. Tommy manages to sneak up unseen. He's hunkered down in the shadows of the church now, planning his next move. Polly activates next. She has the same plan, except she's going to come round the other side. Again, she's got a high agility. It's an easy feat, and a stealth trait makes it an automatic success, unless we score a 1. She rolls the dice, and it's a 4. She's going to use 2 action points to stealthily walk around the left side now. However, in doing that, she does step across a grave, and this is one marked up as having a possible denizen in it. So the GM's going to roll the dice again on a 1 or a 2, whatever it is activates. It's a 4, so whatever was in there, probably some more rats, just ignores the halfling. And that just leaves us with Igor inside the church. The GM decides that he doesn't need to make another search roll because he can see that scroll on the altar. So 1 action point to move to the other end of the church. And then the second action point is going to be used unrolling the scroll and taking a quick peek at it, which turns out to be a big mistake, because this scroll is a trap put here to protect the cemetery. Anyone who opens it must make a saving roll versus magic. If they fail, they read the scroll out loud with some, potentially dire consequences, as we may see. We go to our save table. Igor has a will of 15, and the creator of the scroll has a will of 18. So Igor needs 13 or above to save. It's a foul, and Igor finds himself helplessly reading out these words. There's a short pause, then everyone feels a dull tremor ripple across the cemetery, perhaps as though something is stirring below the ground. That brings us into the next turn, and with these two factions now close in on each other, activation becomes very important, of course. The first counter out of the bag is blue, and the halflings decide to activate Basil the Druid. Now, you may remember he has a spell factor of 2, he's carrying 2 spells. He's cast 1 already, his remaining spell is Earth to Mud. So let's have a look at the details of that. We go to our transmute spells and we look at change. This spell comes under change. We see we've got a range of 15 centimetres. It takes 2 action points to cast and will transform an area 4 centimetres in diameter per spell factor of the caster. Now, we don't do pre-measuring, so Basil has guesstimated the range here. Unfortunately, he's a little bit short. 15 centimetres just takes him up to there. However, that is the centre of the spell effect, and he's got an 8 centimetre diameter from there. So he's just going to catch Nocturnus on the edge of that circle. He's got him. So Basil spends his 2 action points, raises his arms aloft, makes the appropriate gestures, says the appropriate words, and rolls a d20. Anything but a 1, of course. He rolls a 7, so the spell is a success. As we said, the centre will be 15 centimetres away, and he'll just catch Nocturnus in that 4 centimetre radius. He's not going to get Gorm, and he's not going to get the chest, but Nocturnus now finds himself up to his knees in clinging glutinous mud. Second counter out of the bag is also blue. So Tommy is going to activate now, and his plan is to sneak up behind Gorm and deliver a good old stab in the back. That will call for a feat roll. We know that Tommy has an agility of 16, which makes this an easy feat, and he has the trait of stealth, which brings it down to automatic success. However, the Game Master adjudicates that Gorm is alert, because there's lots of stuff going on. A strange spell has just been cast. There's movement in the shadows, so Gorm is on alert. That knocks it back up to easy. Tommy rolls the dice and scores a 19. That's a definite success. He gets to sneak up on Gorm for his first action point, and for his second action point, he's going to get all stabby. This is obviously going to be a surprise attack, but Gorm does get the option to activate here, which he takes. I think I put the wrong colour counter down there. It should be a purple one. Gorm has a defence factor of 16. Tommy has an attack factor of 3. That gives us 13 to hit. Because it's a rear attack, there's a -2 bonus on that. That takes it down to 11. Gorm has activated, so there's no other modifiers there. It's a straight 11. And Tommy rolls a 15, which is a hit. Tommy is also dual wielding because he's got that high agility. And he's got 2 short swords, so that's 2d8 worth of damage. And he rolls a 3 and a 3. 6 points. A little disappointing, perhaps. And given that Gorm has got 22 health points, it's not really a catastrophic hit. But, 6 points is 6 points. Now, Gorm did decide to activate, so he does get a counter. However, because this was a sneak attack, his counter attack is going to be classed as a snap attack. He's going to get a penalty for that. He turns. If he was in melee with another person here, then he wouldn't be able to turn, but he's free to turn. Gorm's attack factor is 2. Tommy's defense factor is 13. That gives us 11. Because it's a snap attack, there's that +2 penalty. That takes us back up to 13. Gorm rolls a 3 and misses. Tommy is easily able to duck under the scything attack from that huge 2-handed sword. Okay, time for the next counter. And it's purple. Alright, Nocturnus is getting a bit fed up, sinking in the mud. He's going to cast a spell of his own. He's going to choose the spell Raise Bones. That's one of his 3 spells. And if we have a look in the book, this is a summoning spell, of course. And it's a Summon Undead. So this will summon 1d4 per spell factor of caster, level 0 undead of choice, who rise up from the ground. We see it's got a range of 2 centimetres, so these creatures basically pop up in front of you, and it takes 2 action points. Now, being the classic necromancer that he is, of course, Nocturnus is going to go for skeletons. So, it's a straight d20 roll, anything but a 1. Yep, we're okay there. And that's 3d4 skeletons. We roll the 3d4, and we come up with 4. I'm sure he would have liked to have a few more, but 4 skeletons it is. Now, he can see Gorm is being attacked behind him, so he's going to put 2 skeletons behind, and the other 2 is going to put in front. The 2 in front are going to be in the mud with him, but I suppose he figures if he's not moving anywhere, at least he's got those 2 skeletons to shield him from any attack from the front. Oh, and of course, some spells are obviously immediate in effect, like your fireballs, thunderbolts and everything else. Other things, like the earth to mud or the raise bones here, unless otherwise stated, the default is that a spell's duration will be 1d3 turns per spell factor of the caster. So if we have a spell factor of 3, the GM secretly rolls 3d3 and then keeps a note, that's the duration. So the spellcaster doesn't know exactly when the spell will end, because, you know, it's good to have that extra little bit of uncertainty. The skeletons here will activate with Nocturnus next turn, and he can give them a single basic command, which in this case will probably be defend me. Our next counter then is blue. It's the halflings. They've got 2 characters yet to activate, and the decision is to activate Ada, the assassin. She's going to spend 2 action points sneaking alongside of the church there and getting into position. Of course, there's those skeletons are a bit off-putting, but there's still the allure of that huge chest of gold. She can easily skirt around the edge of the mud. Oh, by the way, you might want to use like a circle of card or plastic or something for those area effect spells, just so it's clear where the area of effect is. But as I said, Ada can easily skirt around that. She has to make a feat roll, but with her agility and her stealth trait, that's an automatic success, unless we roll a 1. She doesn't, so she is able to easily move up to get right in position for a possible attack next turn. Play shifts back to the Necromancers with the next counter, and it's Burke he's going to activate now. He can see Tommy attacking Gorm there, so he's going to move in to attack Tommy. 1 action point gets him in close, leaving him another action point to attack. So he has an attack factor of 2, Tommy has a defense factor of 13, that gives us an 11, and Tommy has already activated, that's another -1. 10 or more is required, and Burke rolls a 5, so he misses. Tommy escapes again. The next character to activate is Igor, who uses his action points to come out of the church, hold the scroll aloft and say, I think I might have done something wrong, boss. That just leaves 1 counter, blue, so it's Polly to activate. She can see a big mess going on here. There's skeletons, there's mud, there's fighting. Her plan is to sneak across over to the side here. She figures that Gorm has to carry that chest across that way at some point. So she's going to sneak across and hide there, put herself in a position to maybe intercept Gorm when he does move away. So that's 2 movements of 12 centimetres each, easily gets her across. And she still wants to be stealthy as well. It's automatic success because of her agility and because of her trait, providing a 1 isn't rolled, of course. And it isn't. So she moves over to that path, tucks herself behind a bush and waits. So, on to the next turn then, and the good news is the rumbling has stopped. The bad news is it's been replaced by another sound. The sound of earth being shifted about as zombies rise from some of the graves. Yes, that scroll effect now kicks in, and we have a number of zombies coming up. So what I do normally for this is roll a dice for each square, each tile on the board there, and put that number of zombies out. For the sake of today, I'm just going to put out a few zombies, just 1 or 2 by the graves there. We'll put 1 over to the left, and I think we'll place 1 over by that big monument there. These are going to be very slow moving zombies. Of course, as a GM in your scenario, you can tailor this to the amount of players there are and all the rest of it. Really, this type of event is to signal that we're moving towards the end of the game. So you might put this in after 6 or 7 turns or whatever it is, if you want to hurry the ending of the game along, because no one's going to want to be hanging around with hordes of zombies roaming about. Well, I don't know, necromancers might. Each of the zombies gets a black counter, they go into the bag and activate this turn as per the characters. And how about that? The first counter out of the bag is a black one. The zombies get to go first. We'll pick this one at random. So the thing with these is they'll go for the nearest creature, person, whatever is in front of them. If there's any doubt, then the GM can make a dice roll to see who or what they head towards. If we look in the rules, that we see that your usual zombies have a speed of 10 centimeters walk, and they will get 2 action points. However, for this, I'm really going to cut their speed right down to almost half of that. So we're going to activate this chap here. He's going to move forward, and the nearest thing directly in front of him is a skeleton. Wow, look at that. We've got some undead on undead action in the graveyard. Who'd have thunk it? The zombie has 1 action point left, and it's going to launch its attack against the skeleton. Now, you can work these summoned monsters in a couple of ways. You can activate them when their controlling character activates, or potentially you could put purple counters in the bag and activate them as the normal characters as well. Whatever works best for you. Here I'm using Nocturnus. He's decided he's not going to activate yet, so the skeleton won't get a counter attack. Okay, the zombie has an attack factor of 0, skeleton a defense factor of 11. We get a -1 because it's not activating, so it's a 10 or more needed, and the zombie hits. It's just 1d4 of damage from the zombie, 1 point. So even for a skeleton, who normally has about 8 health points, 1 point of damage is no big cause for concern. As it so works out, it's a purple counter next, so Nocturnus decides to activate now and activate all his skeletons. That one there will get the attack back on the zombie now. He's going to move another one in to attack Tommy. And the remaining 2, just in case there's anyone lurking about, because of course he can't see Ada in the shadows, he's going to keep those there as his shield. The skeleton has an attack factor of 1, the zombie a defense factor of 8. That gives us a 7. -1 because the zombie already activated, and a skeleton rolls a 20. How about that? So we're going to adjudicate here that the skeleton does maximum double damage. It's normally a d6, maximum damage would be 6, maximum double damage is 12 points, which is more than enough to totally dismember that poor zombie. 1-0 to the skeletons. We have the second skeleton with an attack on Tommy, who decides to activate. Tommy's up against it here. He's got 3 attackers. He does manage to get his back against that large tombstone behind him, so he's protected there at least. So the skeleton has an attack factor of 1 and Tommy has a defense factor of 13. There's no other modifiers. It's a roll of 12 or more. And the skeleton rolls a 7. That's a miss. Tommy gets his counter attack now. He has an attack factor of 3. The skeleton a defense factor of 11. That makes 8. And Tommy rolls a 17, which is a hit. And of course he's dual wielding those swords for 2d8 damage. And for those he rolls a 5 and a 6. That's 11 points. The skeleton clatters to the floor. One less thing for Tommy to worry about. It's a black counter out of the bag next. Another zombie activation. And we're going to bring this one over here. You can see Igor in front of him with his back turned. Now, zombies are not particularly stealthy. They moan and groan a lot, right? So he's not going to get a stealth attack. Igor can turn. And of course he decides to activate to get his full defense and counter attack. So, the zombie has an attack factor of 0. Igor has a defense factor of 11. It's a straight 11, no other modifiers. And the zombie rolls a 2. That's almost a fumble, but not quite, but it's definitely a miss. Now Igor gets his counter attack. He has an attack factor of 2. The zombie a defense factor of 8. It's a straight 6. And 6 is what he rolls, so that's a hit. He has a short sword, 1d8 damage, and on that he rolls a 7. That leaves this zombie with 1 hit point. So it's not in a good way. I imagine there he sort of cut a leg off or something like that. Though to be fair, it does look like the zombie is carrying a spare one, so who knows. The next counter out is blue, and the halflings decide to activate Polly. Tom is in trouble. She's going to go and help him. She wants to try and sneak up and see if she can get a rear attack on Burke. She's got 1 action point to get there. For the sneak, of course, that's another roll on the feat table, but with her agility, it's easy, plus the stealth trait makes it automatic, unless she rolls a 1. And she rolls a 19. So there we go. That's a very good sneak. Now the GM adjudicates that because Burke is involved in a melee to the front, he can't activate to turn and respond because this is a sneak attack and he is otherwise engaged. So Polly has an attack factor of 2, Burke a defense factor of 12. That gives us a base of 10. We get -2 for the rear attack and we get -1 because Burke is not activated. That's 7 in all. And Polly rolls an 18. It's a hit, but unfortunately she's only got a dagger. 1d6 points of damage, and she rolls 2 points on that. Burke has a total of 16 health points, so he takes 2 off of that. Again, inconvenient, but not a major problem. Yet. Our next 2 counters out of the bag are black, so we're just going to shuffle a couple of those zombies up. I'm going to keep them out of the melee at the moment just to keep things clear. And following that, we have a purple counter, and the Necromancer is going to activate Gorm. I think Gorm is the only character who hasn't been activated yet. So he now gets to take another swing at Tommy. Gorm has an attack factor of 2. Tommy has a defense factor of 13. That gives us 11. Tommy is already activated. That knocks it down to 10. And Gorm rolls a 19. That's a hit. Well, this could be painful for Tommy because we've got that rather large sword plus a strength bonus, 2d6 plus 1. And Gorm rolls 10 points of damage plus 1 for the strength. Tommy takes 11. And yeah, that brings him down to 0 health points. Tommy is down. Now, if you're playing a regular scenario and your character is down to 0 health points or less, that's it, they're down. If you're running linked scenarios or a campaign, there is the prospect of your character surviving. You can make a roll for the next scenario to see if they actually survived. However, in order for them to survive, there must be something left of them. If they're dissolved in acid or eaten by a dragon, then that's it. Unfortunately, they're gone. So a grievous blow for the halflings. Tommy is down, not necessarily out, but is certainly not taking any further part in this scenario. It's another blue counter, so the halflings to activate. We've just got Ada and Basil left. It's decision time for the halflings. They do have that treasure chest in sight, but look at what's around it. We've got the Necromancer crew, we've got skeletons, and we've got zombies as well. That's quite a difficult thing to get to. Basil has used both of his spells. He's not really got anything left up his sleeve. Ada is an assassin, so if she does get a sneak attack, she does maximum damage. But of course, the trick is getting into, say, Nocturnus, getting in through those skeletons. That's looking increasingly difficult. So I think what's going to happen here is Ada is going to use her 2 action points to move back to Basil and have a little conflab about what to do next. Perhaps it's time for a strategic withdrawal. Just 1 counter left then, and that's purple. Burke is the last character to activate. Now, you may remember he couldn't activate before against Polly, but now Tommy is gone. He can activate and turn and attack her. Burke has an attack factor of 2, Polly a defense factor of 12. That takes us to 10, -1 because Polly is previously activated. He needs a 9, and Burke rolls a 12. Now it's just armed with an axe for 1d6. He does 3 points of damage. That's the second hit Polly has taken. She's now down to 8 health points. Things are looking a little shaky for her, given the amount of zombies and other stuff in that area as well. And we're going to draw things to a close there. Overall, not a good game for the halflings. They've lost Tommy. They've not found the gold. They're really coming away empty-handed from this. The Necromancer crew, on the other hand, well, they've got the gold chest. They've also got a fresh body in the shape of Tommy. They've not found the book. Now, they do have a graveyard full of zombies, of course, but Nocturnus is a necromancer. Whereas clerics have the power to turn undead, necromancers have the power to at least stop them, and if they make a good enough roll, potentially even control them. He's got his skeletons with him as well, of course. Once Nocturnus can extricate himself from the mud, the skeletons will follow him. They're going to be around for another few turns. So is a necromancer in a graveyard that's teeming with undead. I don't think Nocturnus is going to be too worried. And if we were running this as part of a linked series of scenarios or a small campaign, the Game Master at the end will tot up the successes or otherwise of each faction, and will accordingly assign points to the faction that might be used to boost characteristics or attack factors, perhaps extra traits, or items such as potions, new weapons, and so on. And of course there's that roll for any characters who might have gone down to 0 health points. Another way of linking scenarios together is to think, well, perhaps the next scenario is the sneaky finders trying to rescue Tommy from the evil clutches of the necromancer. So in a sense, one scenario then leads you directly into the next one. You can start building up this narrative. So I hope this has given you some insight into how We Want the Gold runs. As I said at the start, this is mostly mechanical. I've tried to put a little bit of the atmosphere in, but it is missing that key component of interaction between the various players and factions, which of course leads to all sorts of skullduggery and insults and alliances and all the rest of it. And I also hope you can start to see how adaptable this system is. Your faction can be anything. You could be swashbucklers, you could be orc raiders, you could be cultists trying to set up and run a ritual. Really, any scenario you can think of or any group of factions you can think of, you can bring together and have fun with it. And of course in your own games you're free to modify any of the stats, any of the creatures, add new ones in, make any modifications that you feel will be a better fit for your game and for your players. I'd be very interested to hear about those. I'd also be interested to hear in any suggestions you have or battle reports. Check the links below for our forums and social medias and the like. And we're more than happy to incorporate any of those changes into a second edition should it be required. We also plan on putting out a supplement quite soon of more scenarios, so do keep an eye out for that. Okay, so that's the match between the Necromancers and the Halflings, a game of two halves, I think you'll agree. Final score, Necromancers 1, Halflings 0. That's it from us at the Haunted Graveyard. We'll see you soon, and keep rolling high.
'Cause us we want the gold.